Hello, I am Gregory, and this is Pensane. If you enjoy fountain pens, ink, and stationery, I invite you to subscribe. Follow along on my journey as I share my passion for all things pens and paper and ink. Yeah, so it's that time. It's hard to believe it is January 2026. My goodness. So I present to you my currently inked for January 2026. Yeah, let's get right down to it. All right, so first up, we have this beautiful, I had my eye on this, the Asvine C80 in brown gold for a very long time. And I was excited that this actually came in the stub nib. You see? As a stub nib, it's a nice bouncy nib. And yeah, not the best stub I've used, but it's quite good. Quite good. Yeah. And as you can see from my fingers, that is loaded with Lamy Dark Lilac. I love that ink. And originally I had it in, I want to say a fine nib, or maybe a medium nib. And no, actually I take that back. It was in an extra fine nib. And I was like, you know what? I need to see this ink in a stub, or at least abroad. So there you go. Super happy with it. Of course, tons. It's the modern dark lilac, so it has the green sheen. I guess the old one had a gold sheen, if I understand correctly. But regardless, it's beautiful. I love it. Very nice combo and super wet. All right, up next we have one of my flashier pens. This is the Benu Briolette in Storm. That is with a broad nib. And that is loaded with a relatively new ink to my collection, the wet pen Madrona. Be sure and check out the wet pen right here on YouTube. All right, up next, I love this pen so much. It is hands down the best stub nib in my collection. So this is the Conklin Hippocrates. I love the aesthetic of it, the black with the rose gold. I just love the look of it, the symbols, the simplicity of it. It's a super nice pen. And as I mentioned, it has a stub nib, also rose gold. And again, super smooth, super forgiving, and it handles this particular ink very well. So the ink is J.R. Bond Shogun. Now I will say that ink doesn't have like a ton of shimmer, but it does have some. So also with Madrona, I will mention it's a red ink, but it's super complex and it has some very interesting sheen to it. So I highly recommend that. All right, this is one of the gems of my collection. This was purchased new old stock on eBay. Phil Cow Chameleon in cream. New old stock vintage pen. Unfortunately, Phil Cow hasn't been made in many years now. I believe there is still a fair number of new old stock available on eBay. But yeah, when they're gone, they're going to be gone. So I highly recommend not only that brand, but this pen in particular. If you can get a hold of this pen, it's one of my smoothest writers. So, and this is a medium nib, but it sure writes like a broad. And you see that's a cute little pen. Of course, you can post it and it becomes normal sized. Highly recommend this. It's so unfortunate that they're not being made anymore. So again, that's the Philcow Chameleon in cream with a medium nib. Did I show you the nib? I showed you how I was holding it, but yeah, that's a medium nib. But again, writes like a broad. And that is loaded with my current favorite gray ink, Kaweco Smoky Gray. I love that ink so much. Sometimes it tricks me into thinking it's pencil. A couple times I had to do a double take. Did I write that in pencil? Which would be rare for me, but nevertheless. All right. This is the pen that I describe as the most comfortable in my collection. Though, going back through my sort of daily writings, and I jot some notes about the pens and inks, I actually said in one of the notes that the X159 is more comfortable. I believe it's just a little bit slimmer. I don't know though. I still think this is the most comfortable. I'll have to go back and do a side-by-side comparison again, but this is the Jinhao 9019 Dadao clear, as you can see, and I love that about it because it has this impressive converter in there with the gold tone hardware. Yeah. And it doesn't write like one, but it has a fine nib, and it definitely writes like a medium. And this nib is super bouncy, super bouncy. So if you like a bouncy writing experience, that's the ticket. And that is a number 8 size nib there. So that's where you're getting that bounce from. All right, and that is loaded with Robert Oster Cafe Crema. I do love that ink. It's not my favorite brown, but it's way, way up there. It's definitely one of my favorites. All right. Now we are on to the Keras Penco Vertex in red and black. I love the simplicity of this. I love the concave finial and the sort of torpedo-shaped end finial there. It's a pull-off cap. I love their nibs. The design on their nibs is very nice. And this is a double broad. And it definitely writes like a double broad. And that is loaded with what is becoming one of my favorite black inks, Kaweco Pearl Black, which I dare say rivals my current favorite black, which is TWSBI Black. They are both very, very dark with little or no shading. Yeah, so this is a contender for my favorite black ink. I like a nice solid black, and that provides it. That's wonderful. Now, talking about a bouncy writing experience, this is the Mahjong P139 in white. A stunning, stunning pen. And, you know, it's modeled after another pen, but let's get beyond that. This is an affordable version of a very expensive pen. But this is just beautiful, very well made. And it has a super, super bouncy nib. This is the medium nib, and it's that famous Sun nib, which are known to be very, very good. And I have to say, if you're only going to get one Mahjong pen, this should be it. This is excellent, excellent. It's not exactly cheap, but it's definitely worth the money. Definitely worth it. And that is loaded with what is approaching my favorite green. It's not my favorite green, but it's way up there. Diamine Meadow is stunning. The shading is super intense, going from very light pale green to a very dark getting close to black, but not quite there. So it's definitely green, and you could tell easily that it's green, but it has that strong contrast of the shading, and I love that. To me, that's one of the joys of fountain pens, because that's not something you're going to get out of a ballpoint or a roller ball, is shading. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's unique to fountain pens. I could be wrong, but yeah, stunning combo. I love that. This is the Narwhal Nautilus in Bronze Corridorus. They had me at the word bronze because most people, their favorite metal is gold or silver, platinum. Mine is bronze. I love bronze. And it's this sort of antiqued bronze. So yeah, I love that. It's just beautiful. And this pen design, oh my goodness, the little portholes to see the ink level. Beautiful pen. And that is a broad nib. I almost wish I went with the double broad or the stub on this. But I love the broad also. Their nibs, my experience with their nibs is from medium to stub, and all of those are great. Yeah. Wonderful pen. And that is loaded with my favorite brown ink, which is Jarbon Laidete. I love that so much. Some really strong shading from a light, almost taupe brown to a very dark brown. And yet you can still see this is brown ink, which is one thing I love. So yeah, very, very nice combo. All right, and then we have this, my favorite, Opus 88. I love the look of it. I love the size of it. I love the color. I love the design. This is the Opus 88 Flow in gray. And this is a broad nib. And for those that don't know, this is an eyedropper fill, and specifically it's a Japanese style eyedropper fill. So it does have a stopper in there, so when this is tightened down, It's sealed, protecting ink from going to the nib accidentally. And when you want to write, you just unscrew it a little bit, and the ink will start flowing to the nib again. And that is loaded with the Wet Pen Gasworks Park, which I don't know. I don't know what I was expecting from this ink. I don't know. I was thinking it would look like a sort of sludgy green, but it's actually more of a gray, sometimes black, with a hint of green. So, you know, color-wise, it wasn't quite what I was expecting, but it's still a very good ink. I think I do prefer Madrona just because it's a little more interesting, I guess. But yet another great release from the Wet Pen. Be sure and support him and his channel by purchasing some of his very, very unique inks. All right, so next up we have the Pilot Capless. This was purchased as a capless as opposed to a vanishing point. So this came with the steel alloy nib as opposed to the gold nib. And I honestly was not impressed. Especially compared to the Mahjong A1. The Mahjong A1 had a far smoother nib. So now, mind you, I got this at a very good price. This was, I want to say this was around $75 on Amazon. Again, it was sold as a capless, and it had the steel alloy nib. So that nib I was not happy with. So I ended up buying the gold nib. So effectively, this is a vanishing point. And so now it has well, first of all, the color is deep red, which that in and of itself I have something to comment about, but we'll do that when I get to the next pen. And if you hear a ruckus in the background, that's little Alice playing with her toys, one of our cats. I replaced it with, oh, and actually it was the fine nib. Yeah, because you still see the sticker on there. So it had a fine nib. And again, I was not impressed at all. So I replaced it with a broad nib, and it's the 18 karat, which is much, much better. But I will say, I would expect even better from a gold nib. So this does have the 18 karat broad nib now. Much, much better than it was when I bought it. Still a very good pen and a nice wet writer. All right, so this, and we're going to compare this because this is the Pilot E95S in deep red with a medium 14 karat nib. And we're going to compare that because they're both called deep red, but this to me is red and this to me is deep red. Go figure. They consider them the same, but yeah. So this, I've described many times before as the best pen in my collection, and I stand by that. I love the look of it, the deep red body, the champagne cap, the gold hardware, and the gold accents down here. The very simple but effective posting, the nib design. Oh my goodness. That inlaid nib, I guess that would be considered. So that is the medium. And again, this is the best pen in my collection. So I'm super, super thrilled with this one. But the ink, on the other hand, so it's loaded with Pilot Green. And that is not green. That is beyond a shadow of a doubt teal. That is definitely teal. It's great for a teal ink, but when I loaded it, you know, under the assumption it was green, and that came out, I was disappointed because I was going for a Christmassy green when I inked it up. So not a Christmassy green. Nevertheless, it's a beautiful ink, and it's a good combo. So yeah. All right, now we're gonna get into some real Pilot talk here, because I with the following 3 pens, I've done some nib swapping and nib work. But this is the Pilot Kakuno or Kakuno in red and black. In red and gray. I love that color combination. And this actually has a CM nib on it. And you'll notice it doesn't have the smiley face. And that is because this nib was originally on a pen coming up, the Pilot Prera. So I moved this nib out of the Prera because I absolutely despise the Pilot CM nib. But there's a happy ending. Well, let me explain. So the Pilot CM nib is basically a stub nib. Their stub nibs are very, very sharp. The corners are like, you could like cut something with the corners. And it just provided a horrible, unforgiving writing experience. I mean, if that had been my first experience with fountain pens, I never would have bought another one. Of course, I've since learned a lot over the years. Since, 2018 or 2019, I got into somewhere around there. Yeah, so I was able to work on it. But let me tell you, I spent 20 minutes smoothing this nib. 20 minutes. And like 10 minutes in, I was ready to give up. I was like, well, at this point, I might as well just keep going. You know, if I ruin it, oh well. It's useless to me anyway. But after 20 minutes, I finally got it. It's much better. Definitely not perfect. But, you know, I'm unskilled in such things. And I was way out of my comfort zone smoothing it as much as I did. I mean, basically for 20 minutes. Yeah, but you know, it worked. It's much better. It's actually enjoyable to write with now. So, yeah. And that is loaded with just a Pilot blue-black cartridge. I was just using up some of my back stock of Pilot cartridges as I was working on these pens and smoothing the nibs. And speaking of smoothing, we have our next pen. And this is the Pilot Metropolitan in green. This originally had a CM nib on it, and that one I got so disgusted with, I basically just took the whole nib section and threw it in the trash. Which I'm regretting now, because now I know that if I spend 20 minutes smoothing it, it'll work. But this nib section is actually, or nib unit, is actually from my first ever fountain pen, the black version of the Metropolitan, which again, I had to do smoothing on this as well. It never was a smooth writing experience. It had more feedback than I would have liked, and that probably explains why I dove so deep into fountain pens, because I suspected there was something better out there, and there was. Yeah, so that really started my my deep dive into fountain pens. But I smoothed this out, and it works great now, actually. So yeah, and this one didn't take much smoothing, actually. So that's the Pilot Metropolitan in green with a medium nib. And that is loaded with another cartridge, Pilot Black. All right. First of all, the Pilot Para. This is the Pilot Para Eero Eye in orange, or transparent orange. I love this model of pen. Out of their inexpensive pens, this is by far my favorite. I just love the look of it. I love the size of it. It's small. I love the posting, and yeah. As you can see, this originally came with that CM nib that is now in the Kakuno. And this has the Smiley nib, the Smiley medium nib that was in the Kakuno, or Kakano. And again, I had to do smoothing on it. Basically, with any of the lower end Pilot pens, I feel like they pretty much always need smoothing. I've never had an inexpensive one that was smooth out of the box. But with just a little work, you can get them writing very, very well. Unless you prefer feedback, of course. Then they're good out of the box. But yeah, so I love this pen now. I love it with that medium nib on there, and it has a little happy face, so that makes me happy to see that. Much better pen now, yeah, without that CM nib. Although now the CM nib is good, so I could theoretically move it back, but we'll leave it like this for a while. So, and that is loaded with Pilot Blue, a cartridge. It's a good, solid blue, leaning a little bit towards the dark side. Okay, now this was, I believe, my first adventure into coarse nibs. I could be wrong. I originally had a Platinum 3776 Century in medium, and I love broad nibs. And when I saw they have a coarse nib, I was like, ooh. So this is the Platinum 3776 Century in Chinoncio white. That's fancy. With a coarse 14 karat nib. And I like the coarse nib, but it's very, very, very broad. Which kind of limits the use case. And the white on this pen makes me a little nervous because I wouldn't want to stain this pen. So I'm probably going to be selling this pen in the new year. So if you're interested, definitely reach out to me. Drop a comment down below, and we'll discuss. But otherwise, at some point, it's going to probably go up either in my new Etsy shop or on eBay. I may just put it in my new Etsy shop, since I have an Etsy shop now. But it's a great pen, works beautifully. But you see that is broad, and let's take a close look at that nib again. That is a broad, beefy nib. And I forgot to write it down there, but the ink is Waterman Serenity Blue, which I find very interesting because coming out of the coarse nib, it almost looks watery, like a watery blue, a watery Waterman blue. All right. Oh, so this is my Ranga Salmon in solid green matte. So usually when you order pens from Ranga, they're an Indian pen manufacturer. They hand turn their pens. They give you the option of gloss or matte. And this was my first experience with the matte, and I just love it. I love the way it feels. It's very, very interesting. This is the ebonite, and the glossy version of this would look much, much different. But yeah, I like this matte look to it, and it's appropriately named the salmon because it's kind of fish shaped. I love that about it. You can barely see the line there for the cap and the body. And yes, there is a cat on that nib. So this originally had, I want to say, a Ranga broad nib on it, and it wasn't especially smooth. And I love double broad nibs, so I purchased this nib from Mike at Inkdependence. He has these custom nibs, and he happened to offer a double broad, so I went for it. And it has a little picture of his cat on there, Mr. Nose or Snuggles or one of those. Yeah. So I was laughing to myself when I put it on this pen, because you have a cat nib in a salmon pen. Oh yeah. But yes, very good combo. And that is inked up with an ink from my favorite ink line, which is Sailor Urameku, and this is Kyokuya, which out of that line is not my favorite, but it's right up there. They are very, very complex, magical inks that change color. They go down one color when they're wet, and as they dry, they turn to another color. They look different on different papers, and yeah, you have to experience Sailor Urameku inks. They're brilliant. Yeah, so that's a fun combo there, and I love seeing that ink come out of that double broad nib. All right, I had to do it. I was telling myself there's no point in getting another TWSBI Eco. I have multiples of every nib size, so I don't need another one. But I just kept looking at this Plum Onyx, and I just had to do it. I just love that combo of colors. This is the broad nib, and you'll see it's a coated nib, so it's black to match the hardware there. And as is sometimes, maybe always, the case with black nibs and coated nibs, they sometimes need to be worn in, basically, like a good pair of shoes. But I didn't want to take the time to do that because honestly, I was kind of disappointed with the writing experience when I first inked it up. I was like, wow, this is like the scratchiest eco I've ever experienced. So I did some work on the nib, and now it's excellent. Yeah, so I did have to wear off some of that black just on the tip there, and now it's great. Yeah. But this is the first TWSBI Eco that I've had to work on the nib. Basically, every TWSBI Eco, and I have maybe a dozen or more, all of them have been super smooth out of the box. But this was the first one that was not. So I did have to do a little work. But I'm blaming it on the coated nib. So, and that is loaded with Van Diemen's Prickly Pear, which, if you like Lamy Dark Lilac but want a little more color, a little more pop of color, you might want to look into Van Diemen's Prickly Pear, which I believe is a Pen Chalet exclusive. So yeah, I love that ink, and I love it especially coming out of that pen. Very, very nice combo. All right, the TWSBI love continues. This is the most underrated starter pen, in my opinion. This is the TWSBI Swipe in Smoke. And that has a broad nib. These come with a long, large cartridge of ink. It comes with a regular twist converter and a spring converter. If you're familiar with the TWSBI Go, the spring converter basically turns this into a TWSBI Go, which makes it super easy to ink and super easy to clean. Yeah. So I highly, highly recommend this pen. Even with its funny clip, which does work. I've worn it on shirts, so it does work. It may or may not work on a flannel shirt. But on dress shirts, which at the time when I was working, I wore this in my shirt pocket and it worked fine. So yeah, so I highly recommend this one. I love the TWSBI Swipe. I just wish they would come out with more colors. Yeah. And that is loaded with, and it's going to be difficult or impossible to see it, but TWSBI Black, but, which is my favorite black ink, as I mentioned before, but I added, for the first time ever, pink shimmer to it. I've never added shimmer to a non-shimmer ink. So yeah, if you want to see that process, drop a comment down below and maybe I'll make a video. But yeah, I put pink shimmer in there. I'm slightly disappointed with the pink. Although in my eye right now, I definitely see the pink, but depending on the lighting, sometimes it just looks silver, which is fine. Yeah, I guess I was expecting something a little more dramatic when I put the pink shimmer in there. I just like the idea of this nice solid black with pink shimmer. Yeah, so that went very well, and that pen handles shimmer like a champ. Now we're into some very interesting pens. So this, and I haven't shown this on the channel yet, this is the Wahl Eversharp Skyline in Aviator Black. And that is a fine nib. And stay tuned and be sure and subscribe, because I'm going to be giving one of these away very, very soon. So stay tuned for that. All right, and that is loaded with Robert Oster Direct Sun, which is an interesting red that leans a bit into salmon, maybe salmon colored, which is not my ideal red, but it has some interesting shading there, so I like it. It's nice, and I like it coming out of that aviator black pen. All right, and then we have its brother or sister, we don't know. The Wall Eversharp Skyline, this one in black and gold. This one has a medium nib. I love the look of that. And that is loaded with my favorite green ink, Kyoto Tag Koke Eero. I love that ink so much. Yeah. Just the shade of green, it looks very natural, and the shading is pretty incredible. So I love it. All right. And then the latest edition. And this is perhaps a sneak peek of an upcoming video where I unbox a prize I won on Instagram from Heron's Mooncake and Bottle and Plume. This is a vintage. The two previous ones were the modern Wall Eversharp Skylines, and this is a vintage 40s era Wall Eversharp Skyline in red moire. It is a lever filler. And this is celluloid, so it makes me a little bit nervous. But there you see the Flex 14 karat nib. And this pen was restored by Heron's Mooncake. Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful pen. And that is loaded with Waterman Serenity Blue. And this is where I find it very interesting, because here Waterman Serenity Blue is very, very dark. A very dark blue. And yet, coming out of the coarse nib, not only does it look like a marker, but it's kind of pale, like almost watery, which I find very interesting. Very interesting. Yeah. But anyway, there you go. The paper, by the way, is Marlmon Nemesine. They're A4 horizontal, spiral bound, which I think does well to show when inks are naughty. It looks like the naughtiest ink on here this time around is probably the Hongdian Red. There's some feathering going on there, just a little bit of spread, but pretty much all the others did great. Anyway, there you go. If you watched this whole video, thank you so much. I know it was a long one, but we had a lot of pens to get through, and I had some story time and background to give you, and yeah. Plus, I haven't done one of these in a while, so I wanted to share some thoughts on these pens and inks. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Be sure and check out the links down in the description. I'll put the Etsy shop in there, the Patreon, all the links will be down there. Links to people I've mentioned in the video, that sort of thing. So again, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.